Hello everyone, this is Indy and welcome to my updated Cataclysm Discipline Priest Guide. This guide is current up to patch 4.1 and will include where applicable key updates from patch 4.2. When talenting as a Disc Priest, the most important decision you're going to make is whether or not to spec into Archangel and Atonement. You'll find much scrutiny either way. Everyone has their opinions on this, but what's most important is how effective these talents will be in your own healing, and whether or not you actually plan to utilize these mechanics. It's worth noting that with the buff to crit heals in patch 4.2, Atonement healing does look even better. Let's start from the top to touch base on each talent. You'll definitely want to put 2 points into Imp Power Word Shield to increase the amount absorbed by 20%. Twin Disciplines should also be topped off with 3 points, as this increases your damage and healing by 6%. Mental Agility is a smart choice to put 3 points into, as it reduces your mana cost of your instant cast spells by 10%, and in Disc we utilize many instant spells that would benefit from this talent. Evangelism and Archangel are debatable talents. I choose to keep these talents while other Disc Priests think of them as a waste. The most important thing to remember is how you personally utilize these talents. If you don't find yourself stacking Evangelism and popping Archangel for the healing buff and minor mana kickback, then don't waste the 3 points here. It's worth mentioning that Smite healing can be more effective and mana efficient than direct healing in certain situations. On the other hand, there are other encounters where you may find little opportunity to make full use of these mechanics. Inner Sanctum reduces spell damage taken when Inner Fire is active and increases your movement speed if Inner Will is active. This talent, however, is not too practical for PvE and should be skipped. Soul Warding should be taken by all Disc Priests. This reduces the cooldown of your Power Word Shield by 2 seconds, and since shields are one of our most powerful abilities, this one needs no further explanation. Renewed Hope is a talent you should never pass up, as it will increase the critical effect chance of most of your heals on targets with weakened soul or grace. You'll find these conditions will apply to most, if not all, of your heal targets, especially tanks. Power Infusion increases casting speed and reduces mana cost of spells for 15 seconds on your target. This cooldown was once reserved for DPS classes, but we also now make great use of this talent on ourselves. This is another one you should never pass up. Atonement should be taken if you've decided to utilize the Smite healing mechanic, and have also taken Evangelism and Archangel. When dealing damage with Smite or Holy Fire, this talent will heal a nearby friendly target for 100% of the damage dealt. Inner Focus, while once a debatable talent, is now a staple in the Disc tree. With a cooldown of just 45 seconds and additional talents available to reduce this even further, this one's a no-brainer. Inner Focus will give you a free Flash, Binding, Greater, or Prayer of Healing and increase the crit chance by 25%. Rapture will return 7% of your mana when a Power Word Shield is completely absorbed or dispelled, and can only occur once every 12 seconds. This talent, however, is a must-have. Borrowed Time grants 14% spell haste for 6 seconds after casting a Power Word Shield. This one is very valuable, as you can use the buff when you need to cast a quicker heal. Reflective Shield causes a percentage of the damage you absorb to reflect back at the attacker. This talent should be skipped. It will not affect any target other than yourself and has no real effective use in a PvE setting. Strength of Soul will reduce the duration of weakened soul when your target is healed with Heal, Greater, or Flash heals. Additionally, when casting Inner Focus, you become immune to Silence, Interrupt, and Dispels for 3 to 5 seconds. You don't need to max this talent, however, 1 point will be sufficient. Divine Aegis is a must-have, as it will proc shields on targets of all of your critical heals and every target of your Prayer of Healing. This buff lasts 15 seconds and absorbs 30% of the amount of the initial heal. Pain Suppression should not be skipped. This talent on a 3-minute cooldown will reduce your target's threat by 5%, but most importantly reduces all damage taken by 40% for 8 seconds. This cooldown will be used regularly, and as a Disc Priest you will be expected to have this talent in any raid setting. Train of Thought can be taken depending on whether or not you find yourself benefiting from it. If Greater Heals and Smiting are part of your normal rotation, you might want to take this talent. In a raid setting you may not see much return from this talent, so take or leave it depending on your own playstyle. Focus Will is another debatable talent that I'll only recommend taking if you have a practical application for this proc. It essentially gives you a damage reduction buff when critically hit for more than 10% of your health, and it's still undetermined as to whether or not absorbed damage counts towards this, so my suggestion is to skip this talent. Grace is a must. Now affecting more than just one target, Grace will increase your healing on your target by 8%, stacking up to 3 times. Grace is applied to targets of your Flash, Greater, Heal, and Penance spells. Finally, Power Word Barrier. This is another must, and in raid settings you'll be expected to have this talent. This spell reduces all damage done by 25% for 10 seconds, while under the barrier, spellcasting is also not interrupted by damage. In addition, when glyphed, it increases the healing received by all within the barrier by 10%. Under the Holy Tree, you should be talenting Empowered Healing with 3 points to increase your healing done by 15% with Heal, Flash Heal, Binding, and Greater Heal spells. Then put 3 points into Divine Fury to reduce the cast time of your Smite, Holy Fire, Heal, and Greater Heal by 0.5 seconds. Inspiration should be taken with 2 points as this reduces physical damage taken by 10% by targets of your crit heals. You may skip this talent, however, if your raid has another healer applying the damage reduction buffs. However, assuming otherwise, you should take this talent. Desperate Prayer is also beneficial, especially since it received a respectable buff. It will instantly heal you for 30% of your HP and has a 2-minute cooldown. Surge of Light, when fully talented, will proc a mana-free instant Flash Heal on a 6% chance when casting Smite, Heal, Flash Heal, Binding, or Greater Heal. I did once utilize this talent, but the proc rate is so horrible I later removed my points. Finally, in the Shadow Tree, the only talents you should be interested in taking are either Darkness, that gives 1% haste per point, or Veiled Shadows, which reduces the cooldown of Fade and Shadow Fiend. Now, if you have the extra points to throw into this tree, I highly recommend Veiled Shadows, since stacking haste is really not ideal anymore. The best choices for prime glyphs for the Disc Priest are Penance, reducing the cooldown of Penance by 2 seconds, Power Word Barrier increases healing received by all within by 10%, Power Word Shield heals the target for 20% of the absorption amount, or Prayer of Healing, placing a hot on all of your POH targets. Now, I regularly switch between Penance and Prayer of Healing depending on the encounter and my healing roll. In major glyphs for Archangel Atonement builds, Divine Accuracy is a must, giving you the hit needed to smite or holy fire your targets. Also optional to this spec is the Glyph of Smite, which gives Smite a 20% damage bonus to targets affected by holy fire. The Prayer of Mending glyph has received a buff, and the first charge now heals for an additional 60%, making this glyph a no-brainer. Other major glyphs I frequently switch between, depending on the encounter, are Glyph of Mass Dispel and Glyph of Psychic Scream. Minor glyphs are more trivial and completely up to you as they have no direct effect on your healing or throughput. I find the most useful to be Levitate, Fortitude, and Shadow Fiend. Your most valued stats will be in order of importance: Intellect, Mastery, Spirit, Critical Strike, and Haste. Intellect is clearly your most valued stat as it provides you a larger mana pool, more spell power, mana regen, and crit chance. Now, Mastery has finally come around for us, and stacking Mastery is now much more valuable than Haste or Crit. Each point in Mastery increases the potency of all absorbs by 2.5%. Always try to reforge Crit and Haste into Mastery first. Spirit is a pure mana regen stat, and its value is weighted depending on your current gear level and stats. If you have mana issues, this might be a more valuable stat for you, but as you gear up, you won't be actively seeking Spirit. Critical Strike will increase the crit chance of your spells, and keep in mind our crit heals proc Divine Aegis and Inspiration on our targets. Crit heals will also be getting a respectable buff in patch 4.2, healing for 2 times the normal heal, up from 1.5. Haste is no longer a sought-out stat by Disc Priests and should not be specifically gemmed, reforged, or enchanted when another more useful stat is obtainable. There will still be some that favor haste stacking based on their own individual healing applications in their raid makeup, but generally you should not stack haste unless you have a specific reason to. For enchants, the following are all acceptable choices for Disc Priests, and while I do leave haste enchants as options, they shouldn't be your first choice. For your Helm enchant, the Arcanum of Hyjal provides 60 intellect and 30 crit and is available from the Guardians of Hyjal Quartermaster at Revered Reputation. Shoulder enchants are available from the Therazane Quartermaster. You can obtain a lesser inscription at Honored, but ideally you want the greater inscription of the Charged Lodestone at Exalted Reputation, giving you 50 intellect and 25 haste. Disregard these if you're a scribe and can apply your own. On your cloak, you'll want to enchant 50 intellect, but for tailors you may also embroider your cloak with Dark Glow for a spirit proc or Lightweave for an intellect proc. For chest enchants, your choices are 15 or 20 to stats, or 40 spirit. Your glove enchant should ideally be 50 or 65 mastery, alternatively there's a 50 haste enchant. Bracers should ideally be enchanted with 50 intellect, alternatively you may choose 50 spirit or 50 haste. Leg enchants will come from using a powerful ghostly spell thread, giving you 95 intellect and 55 spirit. Tailors can also apply their own spell threads for just 3 Eternium threads. Boot enchant choices are 50 mastery, Lava Walker, which is 35 mastery and run speed, or 50 haste. Ideal weapon enchants are either Heart Song, which procs a spirit buff, or Power Torrent, which procs an intellect buff. If you equip an offhand, don't forget to enchant that with 40 intellect. Gemming can include a wide variety of choices and combinations. I recommend gemming for useful socket bonuses, but not at the cost of taking unneeded gem stats for sake of gem color. Weigh the benefit of the socket bonus against the gems you need to obtain it and then decide. For your meta gem, you should ideally be using the Ember Shadow Spirit Diamond, which gives 54 int and 2% mana. Alternatively, you may choose a Revitalizing Shadow Spirit Diamond, which gives 54 spirit and 3% increased critical healing effect. Ideal gems will include the Brilliant Inferno Ruby, which gives 40 intellect, the Artful Ember Topaz, which gives 20 intellect and 20 mastery, the Potent Ember Topaz, which gives 20 intellect and 20 crit, the Reckless Ember Topaz, which gives 20 intellect and 20 haste, or the Purified Demon's Eye, which gives 20 intellect and 20 spirit. Your spell usage and rotation as a Disc Priest will depend mostly on your healing assignment and raid or group setting. Your bread and butter spells will always be Power Word Shield, Penance, and Prayer of Mending. Shield spamming in a sense does still exist, and we will frequently shield multiple targets before raid-wide damage ability hits. When tank healing, you may add greater heals into this rotation. When raid healing, you may find yourself adding Prayer of Healing into the mix. You may also cast more Renews during high movement fights. Most of the time, you'll be using Inner Will over Inner Fire for your self buff. Atonement Spec Disc Priest will also be stacking Evangelism during opportune times and also utilizing Archangel. The most important thing to remember is that there's no static rotation or absolute right or wrong way to heal. Regardless of your primary assignments, you'll always be expected to utilize your Power Word Barrier and Pain Suppression at key times that best assist your raid. Be sure to only use your quicker, more costly heals sparingly and as needed. All of these tips and suggestions may vary based on your own role as a healer, your raid makeup, and its size. For instance, healing in a 10-man raid, you may find yourself actually casting more heals due to the less frequent overlapping heals and overhealing you would have in a 25. As a 10-man disc healer, you'll widen your arsenal a bit more, whereas in 25 you won't be casting too many heals with the cast time, with the exception of tank healing. Most of these result in overhealing since your heal is very likely to land after the person gets topped off by a faster healer or hot. I hope that this guide has given you some useful information on Disc Priests. As always, information provided in these guides may become irrelevant or even false as new patches and updates come out. Good luck and thanks for watching.